What's going on, everybody? This is your boy, the Scripture Plug.Albert, and today I'll be reacting to Dr. Gary Habermas as he breaks down about some sources that talk about the reliability of the Gospels. At the end, I will share my thoughts on the video. Let's get into it. Let's get some understanding.
Critical scholars, critics, generally allow that there are sources behind each of the four Gospels. In other words, the author used sources. Someone could say, yeah, but we don't know who the author is. But they use sources that are earlier and come from good roots. Okay, for example, Matthew's the one that, to be honest with you, has probably the least, but he's still got two sources possible. One source and one possible one. That's two. Matthew, critics, it's obvious that Matthew has a source that no other gospel has. They call it M, or they call it special Matthew. Matthew has a bunch of text, just like Luke does, just like John does. Mark is Mark, because he's thought to be the earliest. But Matthew, Luke, and John have sources that are not in Mark, so they got it from somewhere else. So they got data. And Matthew's is sometimes said to be what's called the Logia. We learned from Papias just 25 years after the close of the New Testament, about 125 AD, that there's a group of sayings of Jesus. Matthew might have used those. That's up in the air. But there is the other source called M. Matthew has a source they call M. Luke has a source they call L. These sources are in Luke and nowhere else. Okay. Luke 1, 1-4, says, I checked out the eyewitnesses before I wrote this. Third, Luke was a companion of Paul. So three things for Luke. He has a source that critics, the most strenuous critics in the world, Bart Ehrman, Garrett Ludeman, atheist New Testament scholars, they count L as a source of Luke's. Two, Luke says he interviewed the eyewitnesses and actual witnesses that included eyewitnesses, and he was a companion of the Apostle Paul. All right, so that's Luke. John is believed to have used a miracles document because he numbers the first few miracles. He said, here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the third one. Where does first, second, third come from? They believe he had a document that had them numbered. Plus, John's gospel is the closest to having an eyewitness name on it. In John 20, verse 24, there's like an affidavit there signed by the community. It's thought to be in Ephesus. Traditionally, it's the church in Ephesus. But it's like an affidavit, a signed affidavit, like, hey, I saw these two people married, and I'm a witness. You know how you put witnesses on marriage certificates. Well, they think there's an affidavit on John's gospel. And the community there says, this is he who wrote the book, and we know that his witness is true. And of course, the predominant view is that he's the disciple whom Jesus loved, the beloved apostle. I think that's mentioned 5 times in the book, the beloved apostle. And by the way, John, the only gospel that doesn't mention the apostle John. He doesn't mention himself, is the idea. And they say it's true. Now, there's something on all 4 gospels. One more thing. Richard Bauckham, the very prominent Cambridge and St. Andrews University New Testament scholar, he thinks that the Gospels don't have the actual names in them, but they could have, that they circulated at a very early date with the 4 current names that we have right now. 2 apostles, John and Matthew, and 2 who were written under companionship with apostles. Mark with Peter, I left that out. Mark with Peter, and Luke with the eyewitnesses and Paul. And by the way, in Mark, a critical scholar did a survey, it's published, that most critical scholars believe there's a passion narrative in Mark. Mark used an early passion narrative that is usually dated at the latest 37 AD. That means Mark's source is known to be about +7 after the cross. So, yeah, it's only partially useful to say their names aren't there, because we have a lot of other data from good sources, and the names may have been on the 4 Gospels at a very early date.
Okay, that's some stuff I ain't really know about. So real quick, I had to do a quick Google search because I didn't know about the Q source, the L source, or anything like that. That each gospel had their own sources that they actually use that are distinct from one another. I ain't know that. I ain't gonna front. I ain't gonna say and act like that. But that's what we're here for. We're here to learn about this stuff. So shout out to Dr. Gary Habermas for bringing this out because I didn't know. If you knew about this, sweet. So I got this BYU source pulled up right here. There's other sources that you can read if you just type in M source or Q source or whatever the case. And one of the most prominent ones for the M source anyway is a Boston University thesis in 1940 by a fellow by the name of G.M. Jones. That's there. So, just look into it. You'll find it. But we're here now. So the reason why I wanted to pull this one up at first, for the people, the haters out there that like to say, oh, we don't know who wrote the gospel. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Modern scholars just be tripping. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I just wanted to read this real quick. Although modern scholars have debated the authorship of the gospel, ancient Christian writings are unanimous in ascribing to the tax collector named Matthew in Matthew. Also, all of ancient understanding of church history knows that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all wrote their gospels. Faustus, back in the 400s, tried to be a hater and be like, no, that's not the case. But he got swept out of there. We know what it is, and we have church history to prove so. But anywho, so this is going to read a couple of the sentences here. And again, this is from a BYU source. There is internal evidence in these texts to suggest that Matthew relied, at least in part, on written sources to write his gospels. For example, we know that he relied heavily upon texts from the Old Testament. He often used the Greek word, it is written, to introduce his scriptural quotations, indicating that on these occasions, he was not relying on oral versions. It is clear that Matthew knew both the Hebrew and Greek versions of the Old Testament text. However, it is also possible that Matthew did not have access to written accounts of some of the minor prophets. In Matthew 21:16, he recorded Jesus' quotations of Micah 2:25, but unlike most of his scriptures, citations did not identify the source of the quote. Again, in Matthew 27:9, he quoted Zechariah 11:13, but attributed it to Jeremiah. In these cases, he may have relied upon oral versions of the prophecies. We don't care about that. We ain't that right there. But anyway, modern scholars also identifies two other major sources for Matthew's gospel, the Gospel of Mark and a written source of Jesus' sayings. We must consider each of these briefly if we were to recognize Matthew's editorial works in his gospels. Man, without getting too deep into it, without getting too much, because there's a lot to unpack. Sources. Found this out. Thank God I reacted to this video. So now I can look into more of these sources and get the better understanding of the fact that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John obviously, compiled from the Old Testament, also compiled from one another's works, but also these other sources. That's a beautiful thing. When you're actually able to dive deep and learn about these things, blows my mind. Not saying that I'm a scholar by any means, but I love learning. I especially love learning about church history and what it is that God has for us and what he continued to reveal to us. All the scholars know about it. So I got to get in and I got to learn about it too. Not saying that I'm a scholar, by the way, but I just like learning. With that being said, if you made up to this point, God bless you. Go ahead on and like and subscribe and vibe out with your boy if you want to. You ain't got to, but if you want to. If you made up to this point, you might as well. And then hit that noti bell. When you hit that noti bell, you can be notified anytime that I come on with these pre-recorded reactions, live reactions, or have people come on and share their testimony. That's what I like to do here at the Scripture Plug channel. Spread the love of God, spread the scriptures, spread the truth of everything that God has revealed to us. So come get plugged in with your boy. This has been your boy, Scripture Plug. I'm out.